What's going on, guys? Big card this weekend, UFC 308, but we got some things to talk about before we get into that. I'm going to restructure this a little bit different for this card. I got the orange lights behind me trying to get into the Halloween spirit. I don't even think it's going to show up on screen, but we'll try. So last week's card was actually a fun card. It was actually a pretty fun card. The odd thing about this card was we had another great week with the wagering. Obviously, you guys know the week before we hit 2+ 700s. Like we just destroyed 2 weeks ago. Had another great week from the wagering end. We did Edwards 3 or decision. We hit that. We hit Katona plus 3.5. We hit Nicolau plus 3.5. We hit Cyborg plus 125. We hit Cyborg Live at plus 330. So we had a lot of really good wagers. We missed on Pineda inside the distance. We took a small crack on that. Phillips I thought would win. He didn't. And we took a small bite on Renan Ferreira against Francis, which didn't hit. But overall, we had a really, really good week, 2 weeks in a row. Really, really good with the wagers. So I'm totally happy with that. The odd thing about it, though, from a picking perspective, from a straight picking perspective, we weren't that good actually picking the fights, But what we did was we angled these wagers to give us a leverage to win. So we actually won our wagers, but there were some of the picks that we were off on. Obviously, we picked Pereira over Hernandez. We took Phillips over Font. So, we had, from a picking perspective, it wasn't all that great, but from a wagering perspective, it was very, very good. The brightest spot for us from a DraftKings perspective, this is what we do. This is why I tell you guys all the time, the shows are great, the Twitter's great, the free content is great, but you're not getting the meat and potatoes like you get when you're a member by our site, the madlabmma.com. One of the best leverage plays that we had on the board was taking everybody off to Spain. The world was on Rebels to Spain. I mean, it was ridiculous how people were like sold on this guy. This guy is absolutely 1,000% horrible. And if you listen to the show, I dropped a little nugget on the show about it, but I got into real detail on the site about it. Why can't Austin Lane beat Rebels to Spain? Like, why can't he? There's nothing good about this guy. He's just a big guy. And when you have a division like the heavyweight division where they're starving for bodies, and you got a guy who's 6'7" and he's big and he's got this decorated Taekwondo background, you kind of hope and pray. The company kind of hopes and prays that this guy's going to turn out to something. When he fought Costa, we took Costa, in that fight. When he fought that fight, I knew right there that guy was a complete bum. How people tied him into parlays, how they were picking him, how they were loading him up in DraftKings was literally beyond me. It was literally beyond me. But we've had spots like this before. We see it all the time. We're going to see it on this card. We're going to see numerous amounts on him on this card. I'm going to get into detail with a couple fights. Not too many of them. I want to save a lot of these fights for my guys behind the paywall. It's only fair to them. The meat and potatoes of this card is obviously on the main card. There's a lot of fights in the prelims that I like. There's a lot of dogs on this card that I like. But like I said, we're gonna break down in detail a couple of them, and then the rest of them are gonna be behind the paywall. So we're doing a special this week with swag. We're bringing the swag back. So basically what we do is during the week, I will be throwing out DraftKings tournaments to my subscribers behind the paywall, and we'll be giving away swag. We'll be running contests for name changes and stuff like that. So it's going to be a lot of giveaways for this card. And then obviously you get NFL free with that. So it's totally worth the grab. Go to the madlabmma.com. You will not be madlabmma.com. You will not be disappointed with the content. I'll tell you right now, you're not getting any better combat sports content than you will with us. We're not always right. We're not always wrong, but we're giving you every piece of equipment that you need to go into the week, whether it's wagering, whether it's DFS, whether it's just learning, whether it's just preparing yourself for the fights. And for the price point, it's absolutely ridiculous. You're not finding a better price point for the content that we're giving you. So I urge you to give us a try, especially this week with such a monster card coming up. What else we got on the board that we want to talk about? A lot of, from an NFL perspective, we do NFL. We've been up and down with NFL. I'm very transparent with our wins and losses. We've had some very good weeks. We've had some not so good weeks. This week really wasn't that great of a week in the NFL. Mike Marangelli has the hot hand right now. So everybody who is in the Discord and everyone's who's kind of like riding him a little bit. From a DFS perspective, contrarian corner with Derek was spot on. I also had the roster bully tool, which has been very consistent with if you're looking for leverage plays, value plays, some slate breakers. So that's been really good as well. What else? Other break points. Oh, let's talk about the two fights in PFL. So you had Francis versus Ferreira. Francis did his thing. Not much really to talk about there. But then you talk about Cyborg, and you talk about a woman who comes in at 40 years old, has been through it, has been through so much in her life, from fighting, from getting shunned because she wasn't good looking. You got to remember, this was a girl who, and I hate to say that, but it's the truth. This is a girl who wasn't the pioneer, because there were girls before her. There was Debbie Purcell, who I knew personally. But then you had the Gina Carano era that came in, and nobody wanted to, give Cyborg a shot because she was good to the point where she was going to beat all these girls, but she wasn't marketable because she wasn't that good looking. She had that little, like, that manly way about her. And then you had a beautiful woman like Gina Carano, who came in very well seasoned, very marketable, very relatable to the people. So they kind of kept Cyborg away from her like the plague until they couldn't keep her away anymore, and they fought, and Cyborg completely just dismantled her. The same thing with Ronda Rousey. In her prime, Cyborg destroys Ronda Rousey. Kept her away. They did everything they could to kind of keep Cyborg out of the mix for a long time because she just wasn't marketable. And here she is still fighting and winning championships and multiple championships and multiple. She's an inspiration to women, especially like women who are getting older and feel like they're losing their traction or feel like they're losing their edge. Go watch Cyborg. Go follow Cyborg. That's a woman right there that you can actually hone in on and get inspiration from if you're a woman out there that loves sports. That's about it. So let's jump into this card. So I really do love this card. I really, really do love this card. I like this card because it almost feels like Vegas is. It almost feels like the UFC is throwing everything on the table here, as far as they have to do the right thing when it comes to who they're putting on the card, right? Because of the location that it is. You throw fights in Tennessee, you want guys from that area. You throw fights in New Jersey, New York, you want Serra Longo guys. So where this location is, they have to have these guys on the card. It's just this is what they're clamoring for over there. But there's no shoe-in matchups here. These are all matchups that you're looking at and you're like, wow, I can find the rhyme and reason for both of these guys to win a fight. And this is all across the board. This isn't not just like one or two fights where you're like, oh, dude, this is a layup for him. They're looking to just, get the. These are fights where I could see a lot of these guys from overseas, from that neck of the woods losing. Like the UFC just put the cards on the table and said, like, this isn't going to be a company thing. This is going to be like, let's see who actually wins these fights. And I think this is throwing Vegas in complete disarray. I really, really do, because these odds on some of these fights are absolutely insulting. There's a lot of value on this card from top to bottom. From top to bottom, there's so much value on this card, and this is one of the reasons why I'm keeping a lot of this behind the paywall, because it's only fair to my subs. But I do want to jump into the main event with Topuria and Max Holloway. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this fight just for the mere fact that I find it so intriguing, right? When you look at Max Holloway, let's look at where he's come from. We've watched this guy grow up. We watched this guy almost as a child, right? Go through almost like puberty in a way. And take his lumps in the UFC. We watched him evolve. We watched him grow. So when you watch a guy come in that early, and you see his career as it unfolds, you start to think to yourself, well, he's old. Like, this is a guy who's old and washed. At a certain, not old and washed, but you start thinking, like, this guy's getting up there. Like, he's getting old. Max Holloway is very young. He's very, very young, okay? And when you look at the trajectory of his career, how it obviously was here for a little while when he was young. He was taking his bumps, winning, losing, winning. Then his trajectory went this way. Okay, then all of a sudden his trajectory started going this way, and everybody gave up on him. He had a couple interviews where he wasn't talking right. He had a couple interviews where he just didn't seem right. And everybody was buying into it. And we were one of the people that just kept saying, guys, stay the course. Like, stay the course. Don't listen to these free YouTube channels. Don't listen to these Twitter ambassadors. Don't listen to these guys. Just stay the course. Max Holloway is not washed. He's not washed. He could be going through a rough patch, a rough time right now. Absolutely, he's human. Everybody goes through it. But this dude is far from washed. And there's numerous guys on this card that have gone through this. Holloway's gone through it. Whitaker's really gone through it, where people completely gave up on him. But Holloway was one of those guys. Even when he fought Calvin Kattar, you know, people were judging him and saying, well, you know, this is a guy who's coming to straight boxing and tough kid from Boston, and this is going to be a rough fight for him. And Max Holloway just continues to show you, like, when you count him out, the numbers on his strikes, the numbers of his volume, the numbers of his statistics just continuously get higher. When you think they can't get any higher, they get higher. You know, so then you look at his fight with Justin Gaethje in his last fight. I mean, that was one of the greatest finishes I've ever seen. Definitely of our time in that weight division, but could have been one of the greatest finishes that I've ever seen. With 1 second left on the clock, he didn't have to do that. He was winning that fight from pillar to post. He could have stayed away. And he gets into the pocket with Justin Gaethje, who's got a boatload of power, and says, let's just sling it out and see what happens. He connects with his shot and literally folds him, and the crowd went bananas. Like, that's what Max Holloway's doing, this deep into his career at 26-7. Now you look at a guy in Ilia Topuria. He's 15-0. And I think we all knew when he was coming in that this guy was going to be special. This guy was going to kind of represent the new guard of MMA, and he's done that. And the guy's a spectacular fighter. He's got raw power. He's got great stand-up. He's got very good wrestling. He's good. Just all around, he's a really, really good seasoned fighter, for being such a young guy too. The trajectory of him went like this and straight up, and he's right to the belt. I mean, he's at the pinnacle now, at his young age, but he's not even 30 years old yet. He's sitting at the pinnacle now. He's enjoying the fruits of his labors. He's at soccer games, kicking, the ceremonial balls out. The people love him. He's, I think he's enjoying it a little bit too much for my liking. But hey, this is what these guys fight for. They fight to reach that pinnacle. They fight for these big paydays. They fight to finally get their opportunity to see what it's like to have wealth and fame and fortune. So good for him. He seems like a good guy. He's not really the type of guy that I personally like all that much. I think he's a little too cocky, a little too brash. But then there's certain points in time where he has interviews and he's a really respectful guy. I think he's been very respectful of Max Holloway without going over the line. Like, I like when guys are respectful, but I don't like when they go over the line as far as, like, they're sucking him off. You know what I mean? Like, oh, yeah, this is the greatest fight. He's respectful to him. He respects all Max Holloway's done, but he also says, I'm going to knock this guy out. Like, you have to have that persona. And if you don't like that, then that's on you. But that's the right persona to have. You respect certain people. You got to respect Max Holloway for what he's done in the sport, but you also can't give him too much respect, because that's going to follow you into the cage, and then you could become starstruck. So when you look at this fight, though, and you look at how this thing can play out, I see a lot of people saying, like, Topuria can knock him out, that Topuria is just a new breed of fighter. Max Holloway, if you watch his last fight against, Justin Gaethje, yeah, it was a masterclass, but Justin Gaethje's so much slower than Topuria. Topuria's going to bring that speed. He's going to bring that crispness, like that combination he landed on Volkanovski right before he knocked him out. It's just a different level of speed and explosion. That's all fine, and it all kind of makes sense. But then you got to look at, okay, well, when Topuria fought Volkanovski, did he fight the Volkanovski that Max Holloway fought? Was it the same Volkanovski, or was it a shell of that Volkanovski? Because when Max Holloway fought Volkanovski, that's when Volk was on the top of his game. Topuria fought Volkanovski after all these rumors came out that he had drinking problems, that he was going through a depression, that he was taking fights. He didn't seem like he was himself anymore. You know what I mean? And there was numerous fights that have shown that. So, like, was that the correct Volk? Did he fight like a prime Volk? I personally don't think so. But Can't take it away from him. He's got the name on the resume. But when you speak of all these things, you got to look at the other side. Does he have the power to knock him out? Yes, 1,000%. Max Holloway's never been knocked out in his entire career. Like, this guy's never been knocked out. This guy has the uncanny ability to sustain punishment. I don't like his defense all that much. Sometimes he gets into, like when he was in the firefights with Justin Gaethje during that fight, I was like, please don't do it, because he literally will engage. He don't care. He will go into the pocket and he will engage with you. But he has an uncanny ability to kind of roll with punches and not get caught clean. That's the thing with Holloway. I've seen him get caught clean a couple times. I've seen him take a back step. I've seen him rocked. I've seen him hurt. You can tell. If you've ever been knocked out or you've ever been put on Queer Street, you can tell by somebody's body language. I remember feeling that. You know what I mean? So I know he's been rocked before. But for the most part, when he does come in and he engages, he kind of does a good job rolling with punches. He doesn't get caught completely. He doesn't walk onto punches is what I'm saying. Ilia Topuria is going to have to make him walk onto those punches. And even then, is he going to be powerful enough to knock him out? Nobody's been able to knock him out before. So Topuria is going to be the guy that's going to come in and just completely right that ship. Maybe. Maybe he is. Then you talk about the wrestling. And you talk about, well, what happens if Topuria starts changing things up and starts getting the wrestling going? Good point. Fact of the matter is Max Holloway's takedown defense is elite. His takedown defense is absolutely elite. So where is that going to come into play? So the way I'm looking at this fight, and I'm saying, okay, well, can Topuria knock him out? Sure. Can he take him down? Sure. Is he going to be able to hold him down? Do you think that Max Holloway is actually going to be grounded and be on his back for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then maybe the next round he comes back out, he takes him back down again, it's going to be like a grappling fest? Come on, guys. No. Like, if he gets taken down, he gets taken down, but he's not getting controlled on the ground for 25 minutes. That's not happening. I would be floored if that happens. I would be absolutely floored if Topuria takes this into a grappling clinic and actually tries to grapple with him and has a lot of success. I'd be floored. Take him down? Yeah, but I expect Max to pop back up soon after. So that leaves you with a technical striking match for 25 minutes. Who's your money on? Who's your money on? Do you think that Topuria can last 25 minutes while Max makes all his adjustments? And all his adjustments and all his adjustments. If you believe that, then you got your clear pick right here in Topuria. Personally for me, I think that Topuria is going to look very good for the first 3 rounds in a really close fight, like a really close fight. They're both going to have they're both going to have their moments. Topuria is probably going to hit him with some big shots, maybe even back him up. Max Holloway is going to start off a little sluggish, trying to work his jabs, sticking them, being very cautious. But I think once this thing hits the championship round, I just think Holloway's got a different gear than everybody else. He has a gear that he makes that adjustment, and the volume just gets more plentiful than it was earlier. I mean, this is a guy who threw north of 500 punches in one fight against Calvin Kattar. Once he finds his range, once he finds his rhythm, I don't know anybody who can keep up with him when he finds his flow state. Now, we've seen a couple different Max Holloways. We've seen Max Holloway come in and not look so good. Max Holloway's got to come in and look like the Max Holloway when he's in his flow state. If he comes in, then you're going to see a very close fight for the first couple rounds. But then I do really believe that Max Holloway is going to pull away in this fight. I do. I think the 4th and 5th round are going to be the telltale rounds in this fight that are going to separate the two of them. And if you're telling me that that's what kind of fight this is going to be, you got to prove to me that you could beat Max Holloway before I pick you. I'm not saying Topuria can't. I'm not saying he doesn't have the ability, because he absolutely does. He's young, he's hungry, he's confident, he's got momentum, he's undefeated, extremely well-rounded. But before I pick you to beat a guy like Max Holloway, you got to show me that for 25 minutes you can hang with this guy. You can hang with this guy. And I'm not certain he can. I'm not certain anybody in the division can. So, I mean, when I saw these odds, I was completely blown away by these odds. Completely blown away. And I think there's a lot of value on Max Holloway. This is like a dog or pass situation for me. Unless you really believe that Topuria can knock him out and you want to take him by knockout. But for me, you have to prove to me that you can beat a guy like Max Holloway in a stand-up fight for 25 minutes. I can't just bank on you knocking him out. If that's the case, I would have banked on Justin Gaethje. I would have said Justin Gaethje's got that kind of power to knock him out. He walks through punches. He's got crazy durability. You got to remember, we've seen Topuria rock before, too. He got hit with a head kick by Jai Herbert. Jai Herbert just couldn't really finish him off, and he was able to secure a takedown to kind of kick his cobwebs off. He ain't going to be able to secure a takedown with Max Holloway if he gets rocked. So that's another thing I look at too. Like, you look at a guy like Justin Gaethje. Yeah, he's been flatlined before, but this dude is ultra durable. Like, you can rock him, and he's coming back for more. And he hits with a ton of bricks. And if I was going to go that route, I would say, yeah, Holloway's got the better hands, better patterns, higher strike count, faster, slicker, more technical. But you give me 25 minutes with Justin Gaethje, I think he can clip him and knock him out. I would have took that path back then. I can't take that path here until I see it. Like, somebody's got to do it before I pick against Holloway. So I'm going Holloway here. I'm going to go Holloway by decision. And I think there's value there. I think there's total value there. Next fight we will jump into the co-main event. It's Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev. This fight's interesting to me. This is another guy in Robert Whittaker who everybody kind of sold up the river. And we laughed and we snickered and we literally thought people were crazy. If you actually go back and see the videos, I was laughing at people for saying that Jared Cannonier was going to beat Robert Whittaker. Me and Anthony were here. We were literally laughing at people, and people were sold up a river that this guy was going to lose this fight, that he was washed. And I remember the headline of our thing the next day was "How soon people forget." And now everybody uses that. I see people using it on Twitter all the time. How soon people forget. But this is a guy who, for my money, like, one of the best middleweights of our time, one of the best middleweights of all time. He's going against a guy in Khamzat who really, the guys he beat that were really, really class A were welterweights. Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman gave him hell on earth. Gilbert Burns gave him even more hell on earth. You know what I mean? So it's like you got two top-level elite welterweights, both of them not really so much in their prime, and Usman came in on short notice and gave him hell on earth. So now he's fighting Robert Whittaker. Now, mind you, he fought at middleweight and he fought GM3, but GM3 is a guy, first of all, who, you look at his resume, he's got a ton of submissions. He's a decent kickboxer under Duke Roufus, decorated, tough guy, but doesn't got this like elite takedown defense or this elite pedigree anywhere outside of his submissions. And you get a guy like Chimaev on top of you, like, how many opportunities are you really going to get to submit that guy off your back with all the chaos that he brings? It was a terrible matchup for him. Now you got a guy who, in Chimaev, who's fighting Whittaker, who Whittaker's back on his shelf again. People are believing in him again, which is crazy. I just can't believe they stopped believing him. But he's so well-rounded. He's got elite takedown defense. He's got crazy striking, very, very smart in the cage. His chin can be a little suspect at times. He does hang his hands really, really low, but it's just the way he fights, and that's what kind of throws people off. And in this fight, you're going to look at a tale of two fights. Again, you're going to look at Chimaev is going to look to bring chaos early. He's going to look to ground this fight. He's going to look to kind of smother him and beat him up on the ground, and might even do that in the first round. He might even have that success. He might be able to pin him down, land some big shots, land some big elbows, and Robert Whittaker goes back to the corner, cut up. Oh no, Robert Whittaker. You got to remember, there's 4 more rounds in that fight. There's 4. This ain't a 3-round fight. This is a 5-round fight. If this was a 3-round fight, I might be considering going the other way a little bit. This is a 5-round fight, and if you're giving me both of these guys locked into the cage for 25 minutes, how do you not take Robert Whittaker? Chimaev has shown that he's fades. Chimaev has shown that he doesn't have a lot of tricks in his bag. Chimaev has shown that his striking is very rudimentary at times. He can be reversed. His wrestling does tend to fade as the fight goes down the stretch. Robert Whittaker shows no signs of that. Robert Whittaker shows that he becomes more and more and more of a dog as time goes on. So, for me, I look at this fight and I'm saying 3-round fight. Yeah, I could see it. Chimaev's on his home soil, over there, kind of, sort of. 3-round fight. He's probably going to win that first round with all the chaos and the pressure that he puts on Whittaker. Whittaker's going to have to come back and win 2 rounds in a row. Over there, 3 judges. I don't know. Now you're telling me it's a 5-round fight. Whittaker's got 5 rounds to work in this fight. Chimaev's got to show me that he can come up, that he can fight at middleweight and beat a guy like Whittaker. This is another thing you need to show me that you can do it. I'm not sold on Chimaev. I never was sold on Chimaev. I think he's a very good athlete. I think he's a freaky athlete. I think he's intimidating. He's got very good wrestling, but what good is all that talent? What good is all that pressure wrestling? What good is all that pace if you don't have the conditioning to hold it up for 25 minutes? Like that, you got a guy, Whitaker, who is good everywhere. He's smart everywhere. He's seen every style. He's fought every kind of fighter, and he's beat him. He's been a champion. So this is another dog. I'm siding with another dog. I think all the value is on Whitaker here. I really, really do. I think all the value is on Whitaker here. Before we get into the rest of this, and we talk about, I'm going to breeze through a couple of these. We got Mackenzie's lock of the week.
We all love RDA and everything he's brought to the table throughout his entire career. He's well-rounded, good for the sport, and defied Father Time. But here he is in a very tough matchup against Jeff Neal, who is athletic, explosive, and fresher. With that being said, how can anyone bet against RDA? So we're going to take you around from doing that and jump on the over 2.5 rounds at -160. Both men do have finishes on their resume, but wiser fighters become much more tactical fighters, and I think that's what you have here. Give me over 2.5 rounds for -160.
All right, so the rest of this main card, though, is good. You got Ankalaev and Rakic, which I got a pretty decent lean on. Leron Murphy and Ige, another fight. You know what the crazy thing about the Ige fight is that you would think the UFC would want to do him like a favor. You know what I mean? In this fight, like you would think they want him to do him a favor after he steps in on like 2 hours notice. And fights a beast to kind of save the card a little bit, and then they throw him in with Leron Murphy. Like what kind of favor are you doing? And not to mention, he's got to go all the way over there, for it. So I don't know what the UFC was doing there. Listen, I love Dan Ige. I just think this is a terrible matchup for him. I do. I think this is a terrible, terrible matchup for him. I think that he's durable. I think he's got great boxing, but I think it ends there with him. He wins his fights on toughness. He wins his fights on his durability, where he kind of marches forward. He'll eat 2 to land 1. And Murphy might not be there for him to find. He'll be able to hunt him down, but I think he's going to spend the majority of the 15 minutes doing exactly that, hunting him down and maybe just not finding Murphy. So I do like Murphy there. I think they got that one right. Then you got... You have Magomedov and Petrosian, another good fight. Really, really good fight. On the prelims, this one starts early, guys, too. You got to remember, this fight starts over here on the West Coast, 7 a.m. So that's 7, 8, 9. That's 10 a.m. your time. So you guys got to be up early. Jeff Neal, RDA, another good fight. Really, really good fight. I could see that fight going both ways. If RDA gets his wrestling going and really can continuously push on the hips of Neal, I think that's an RDA fight that he can win. If Neal can kind of separate and utilize his athletic ability, his youth, his range, and his power, that's a fight Neal can win. Great fight. Rebecca and Orolbai, another good fight. 2 guys that are not carbon copies of each other, but hold similar skill sets. I mean, Rebecca's obviously using his striking a lot more. Orolbai's going to want to use his wrestling a lot more. Rebecca's going to have to use his defensive wrestling to kind of nullify that. Is Rebecca's conditioning going to hold up? These are all questions that are going to be answered, but really good fight. Magomedov and Ferreira, good fight. This fight I don't get. Kenny Njoku and Barnett. I mean, I don't get this fight. I mean, I understand Kennedy's on a 2-fight losing streak. If he wants to stay in the UFC, he's got to win this fight. But like Chris Barnett, like there's nothing good about Chris Barnett. I'm sorry, he's fun. He's like seems like a type of guy you would want to hang out with at a bar. Probably makes everybody laugh. But I don't. This fight I just don't get. Basarab, Victor Hugo, Nardiev and Silva, fun fight. Fakhretdinov's on this card. Like it's a lot of good fights on this card. One fight that got pulled that I'm pissed it got pulled was Said Nurmagomedov and Daniel Santos. That was a fight I was actually looking forward to. That would have been a crazy fight to watch. But overall, it's a really, really, really fun card. So I gave you guys 2 dogs. The rest of it, if you want it, come to the madlabmma.com. I have a lot of dogs on this card that I like. This bet pack is going to be full. The DFS is going to be full. If you guys are looking for leverage and you guys are looking for some plays that are completely off the cuff, because like I said, we do everything off the cuff. We're not public perception. One guy takes a bet, everybody rides it. We go, like when everyone was on Rebels to Spain this week, we completely said, this guy's a bum. We're backing off, and we watch everybody's lineup burn. So I have a lot to say on this card. There's a lot of Vegas lines that are extremely off from both sides. I mean, there's guys that should be much bigger favorites, and there's guys that there's no way they should be this kind of a dog. And I am going to pick and prod at this card like crazy. So come to madlabmma.com. If there's ever a time to join, this is without a doubt the week. I will talk to you next week.